Hello and welcome to Django DRF Query Fundamentals course. My name is Xander. Now this tutorial is part of a whole course playlist available for free on YouTube. If you do like this course and you want to delve deeper, the full course is available for purchase at Udemy. Again, find all the resources and links in this video's description. Do remember to subscribe to the channel for weekly promotions, discounts, and of course Udemy course giveaways. Now that we have a foundational knowledge of inserting into single and multiple tables where there are relationships between tables, let's now think about moving on to the next module where we want to now query the database to extract data from the database. And that is where the bulk of this course is going to be focused on, because there are just so many actions and approaches and variety of tools that we have to perform these type of actions on the database. Now, before we do that, I wanted to make sure that any of the tutorials that we run after this module, we already have some initial data in the database so that we can just get on with querying the database, returning data without having to worry about inserting data every time we run a query. So let's go ahead in this tutorial and create some initial database data that we can automate and have inserted into the database tables when we start up the database in Docker. So not only just for this course, but when working with Django or any web framework, you often need to seed or populate your database with initial data. So this is especially useful for testing, development, or setting up a production environment. So there are several approaches, at least, to generate seed data in Django. Right, so I'm going to use the easy approach because I don't really need too much data here. So let's go ahead and grab the class category, start with category, and then I'm going to ask my friendly AI programming partner to create a CSV file with header for the following Django model. Let's ask it to create 10 records. Right, so in addition to a valid set of data that I can use to initially insert into the database table, I also have instructions on how to actually insert that data. So this is the SQL code that I can use to actually insert this data. So let's utilize this information to set this up. Importantly here is that I'm going to need to make this data available in my Docker container so that the Postgres database on initialization can access the data and insert it into my tables. Okay, so go ahead and create a new folder. I've called it DB data. I've created a new file and I've changed the format slightly from what our AI friend produced. You can see that you have the header information at the top here, ID, parent, name, that all correlates to the fields in the category table. And then the data here, 1 ID, parent name, nothing, electronic. So you can see that the data matches the fields defined here in the header. Right, so what you can do is ask your AI friend to create some more. So if we copy the top here, move over to our AI friend, can you build some more in one file using the same format? Let's see if it can. So yeah, there we go. So it's going to provide you some more data. So if you wanted to add some more, that's a simple, quick way of you adding some more data into the database. Once you've done the category, you can do it 7 more times and produce the data for the other tables. Now, I have already created that data for you, and you can download it from the module primer. Do be careful when you create the data to remember that we do have relationships. For example, with products, there has to be a category that exists for us to build the product. So there's no point creating a product that isn't connected or related to a category that exists. So when I ask ChatGPT for the data, I provide it the category information so that it can produce valid products to insert. And that's the same for all of the tables. So now I need to make this data available in the Postgres container. So here in the volumes, I simply need to add a new volume. So to map across this new folder, the DB data folder, I need to map that across to my container inside of the data folder. There we go. So I map that data across. That means now our container can access this data so that we can insert it into the database. So the last step of the automation of the process of bringing up the Django and Postgres service in Docker containers is we need to simply update our initial SQL file, or create a new one, either way, and load it all in. So for this, we saw in ChatGPT, it provided us the SQL needed, and that was, I think it was copy. So here you can see that we are inserting from our CSV file using copy. So we define the table we want to insert into the fields, and then we define the data in our CSV file. So that matches /data. Remember, that's the folder that we're using on the container. And then category CSV, that's where the data is going to reside. Right, so the delimiter refers to how the data is separated. So it's separated by commas. So that's required. And CSV header indicates the fact that the first line here is a header indicating the fields, the corresponding fields with the data. So with all that lined up now, when we start our Docker and, if we can find it, when we start our Docker and Postgres containers, the data should be pre-inserted into the database, ready for us to start learning how to query it from the database. So let's give it a go. So we'll restart our containers. I use, we don't need build. So let's go ahead and compose up D. So our containers have now started. Let's double check. So if we go into the inventory container, let's inspect, and you can see right here that we have copy, copy, copy. And those numbers indicate how many records we've inserted into whatever table that was used at that point in time. So it looks like that we have correctly inserted data into the database, except we've got potentially an error here. So relation auth user does not exist at character 2. That's potentially an issue. Select one as a from if user where of you. Okay, so potentially we have a problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Potentially we do. So let's take a look by going into exec here and logging into our database. Okay, then Tory. Okay, let's just see. Let's select select all from inventory user. Okay, so it does look like we've added users. So I'm not entirely sure what that error is, but all the data has been inserted, it looks like, and you can go ahead and check out some other tables. So product table, looks like we have some data, and I think we're comfortable to assume, that all of the other data has been inserted as well. But you can go ahead and inspect that. If there are any issues along the way, I will make the changes, and I have already updated the data, but I think we're good to go. Now, I have completely overlooked the different approaches that you can take to insert data into your database in this tutorial. At least over time, I may add to the course and add different approaches if they are indeed useful for you. Now, this is a list of some of the different approaches to consider. Now, really, this depends on your scenario. Whether you have the data or not, that will obviously reflect on how you insert that data, which approach you use, which format you have the data in, maybe, whether you need to clean up the data beforehand or change format. That just asks so many different variables here. In this example, in this tutorial, we obviously used our AI coding partner to generate some data for us, but there are plenty of other tools, for example, Faker, using tools like Faker and, for example, Factory Boy, to automate the process of creating data. Within Django, we have something called fixtures. Fixtures are Django specific, which enables you to create data, typically originating from the database, that we can use to insert into the database. And we can use, for example, custom management commands to insert these fixtures into the database. And this can be supported by the varied tools that Django provides. Bulk create, because we are obviously inserting multiple records. We can use raw SQL in the migration, and there are Django signals that help us seed data after migration. So plenty of different approaches. Apologies, I didn't really cover them here, but the point is that we have data now in our database, and we can move across to the next module and start to actually utilize this information to learn more about actually how to query the database.